Hello, welcome to the Tesla to Mars episode number 19. Today we don't do our episode in Dutch because we have a very special guest named Brian from the channel on X called Future ASA. And together with Case and Brian, we will do a deep dive into everything Cybercab related. Also, maybe a little bit of the new models that are being rumored by Tesla at this point. But both Case and Brian has visited the Cybercab. The Cybercab is also being presented in Amsterdam by the end of the year, so we're all going to visit. There's very high demand in the open day that Tesla has sent the invitation to all the people, and a lot of people are on the waiting list to join. So there's a lot of excitement around this new model, and Brian and Case are the ones that have already seen that model. And Brian, who is, let's say, very active in the Tesla community already for 4 years, he has been talking with many of the engineers involved into this process, and I think that leads us to a lot of key insights. And when Tesla started announcing their new, the next gen vehicle, as they call it, so a little bit of robotaxi and something that still needs to be announced, maybe in the half year of 2025. Tesla spilled already all the beans in their shareholder meeting that explained that they were going to reduce costs with about 50%, but it was still very unclear how they will go to do that. So Brian, you think after everything you have seen that a 50% cost reduction will be achievable, or is that a far stretch goal?
It is absolutely achievable. Everything has been rethought with just one purpose in mind, which is you're not driving. And the costs are, we can go one system at a time, from the batteries to the motors to the suspension to the interior and the exterior. Everything has been rethought. The only thing that's going to be remotely similar in cost to a traditional car is going to be the blinkers, maybe the headlights. Everything else will be a substantial cost reduction.
Yeah, before we dive into details of all the technical specifications that you have seen, and I know Case and Florian are very excited about that as well, because they're very in the weeds as well of all the materials of Tesla. The guys have a fleet of 4,500 cars, so they know all the ins and outs on, let's say, the Model Y and the Model 3, and therefore also Model X and S. And I think it was in 2016 that Elon started talking about the machine that makes the machine. And after watching your videos, I got all aroused by the idea of that vision finally coming to fruition. So if you look at the shareholder deck in 23, you see the whole process of the Model S, later the Model X, which was the Fabergé egg, then 2016 hit, 2017 with the Model 3 production hell, then the exoskeleton of the Cybertruck, but also outlining how first the design was always design, then production, or then automation. And with the Cybercab and all those new vehicles that are being announced, that is totally reversed or all integrated as a team. So what are your thoughts coming down from manufacturing? Then we can start going into all the details of the engineering.
So if you look back at the Model 3 ramp, there was production hell. Elon said, look, why do we have so many people involved in building the car? Why don't we have robots build every last part of it? And so they tried that, and it didn't work. It was a nightmare. It was a disaster, because what you'd done is you'd taken a 100-year-old manufacturing philosophy and tried to just substitute in robots. And there are things robots just aren't good at. Wiring harnesses, threading the wiring through is a very human thing to do. The putting in the insulation requires a degree of touch that robots just aren't going to understand the way a human instinctively does. With every car that Tesla has made since the first one, since the Model S, everything has been one step closer to a different manufacturing philosophy, which they're now calling unboxed. Tesla was the first company to put the battery in the floor. That's a big, easy step. But then you saw with the Model Y is where it started getting exciting. At the Giga Berlin opening, you saw that, wait a minute, the seats are attached to the battery before it goes in. Why has no one ever done this? And then you saw with the Cybertruck, this was another big step toward it, where you're getting this idea that, wait a minute, we can just put this together in big chunks, like the way they build large ships now. A cruise ship is built the same way. It's of course very involved. A cruise ship is low volume, but everything has been a step in this direction. So with the Cybercab, the engineers have said it is designed to be built without human hands. It is, every step of it should be fully automatable. And so we've got all these modules that are pre-assembled that come together at the last minute. So that means that, yeah, it's going to be easier. It's going to be simpler. It's going to be hands-off. And because it's not a traditional straight line, with a manufacturing line, the whole thing can only move as fast as the slowest part of the line. But with this, every section can be ready to go. It can have, enough pieces piled into the sides of the machine that when it gets to its spot, it's ready to go. And that's the first step in it, is the machine that builds the machine. And the other advantage you end up with is, right now at a factory, each station on the assembly line is roughly the size of one car and a half. But now with this, the line would be the size of each module. So that might only be 3 feet or 10 feet, a meter or 3. It's not much space. So the entire factory gets shrunken down. The line gets much shorter, and it can move that much faster and easier. So that's just starting with the manufacturability and the design on that.
Yeah, that's exactly what you highlight here. I will share my screen for a second to also get the viewers a bit up to speed on this. This is a slide in investor relation where you talked about, right, the new footprint that has 40% reduction in manufacturing, but also if they highlight where the cost reduction is coming from. Just a moment. Am I sharing screen here or not?
Not yet. No,
not yet.
Wait, percent. Yeah.
Brian. In the meantime, I would like to ask you a question. So I heard a podcast. I think it was like 1.5 years ago, about someone who already was working on the, let's say, this next gen model. So this robotaxi model, and he said it was basically like 80% done, and it's really like a year ago, maybe longer. And I know from the algorithm of Elon Musk that he first wants to delete stuff, right? So once I was in the anticipation that they would come with the robotaxi earlier, so already last year, end of last year, or beginning of this year, and it didn't come through. But actually, when I heard your content, it made a lot of sense, because I think they've been optimizing with the end in mind. And maybe for also a little bit of let's say context, I think you got all the responses from the engineers of Tesla directly, right?
Yes, all of the engineers. There were 5 of them at this event.
Yeah. So it actually makes a lot of sense that it takes a while, but it feels like a lot of things are now coming together, which have been shouted by Tesla and the team for like 3 or 4 years. How do you see that all like coming together, and what are your expectations on the timelines there?
So on the timeline, the real big hangup is the software has to work. Version 13 is promising. I haven't had firsthand experience with it. I hope to get it soon. I did get an update last night. I'm now at 12.5.6.5.4. My goodness.
Easy.
So easy, but I do remember it. And when I say it, a lot of people get excited, like, ooh, I'm on 0.3. So there's, and it is getting better. Version 11 for me was a nightmare. It didn't work. It was dangerous. It was fun, but a dangerous kind of fun. And all of the 12 dot builds have gotten a lot better. And we've already seen videos of version 13, and not just from the people who are always saying nice things, but from the channels that are always trying to break it to see where the limits are, and they're getting great results. If version 13 is it, and it is solved today, they will begin putting the factory components in, and I would expect to see production in 12 to 18 months. It is not ready today, so I think they're on hold for that. Because once it works, we don't have to wait for the factory to be built. Unlike everybody else in the business, they're not waiting for the vehicles are already out there. As you guys know very well,
with the hardware.
Yeah, you flip a switch and well, Waymo's got 500 cars or 1,000, whatever they've got, and when the switch is flipped, well, Tesla has 3 million cars. And then the RoboCab would come along later and fill a much more specific application that is purpose-built.
We haven't seen Dan O'Dowd testing the new build, right?
Not yet. Not yet. Version 13 is still in such limited release that that it probably will be a little while before he can get his hands on it. But he's getting quieter and quieter, which is interesting for such a very loud man.
Yeah, and very vocal.
Very vocal. And what I always say is, I don't trust someone who owns that many mannequins. And he says, well, I had to drive all over town to buy them. Sure, Dan, but you knew where to go. So you were going to show the slide?
Yeah. In the slide of it's a very, very, very bigger picture slide that Tesla shared in their 2023 presentation, actually going all the way back of the history of the Model 3, as we just alluded. But it also shares some forward-thinking thoughts that we might use for our conversation of today. So early days, we see Elon and Franz literally standing next to the car. Well, in that sense, nothing changed. But the Model S was very much based on the principles of design, then engineering, and then manufacturing. This is how cars are being made for the last, let's say, 100 years. The Model 3 was already like design, engineer, manufacturing sitting very much together, and then the automation kicked in. Well, we all know the hard times of the Tesla production hell. Was very challenging. And with the Cybertruck steel exoskeleton, also the automation part with the giga castings, etc., started to become a very big thing. So the process for the future, one, design, engineer, manufacturing, automation here coming together. And as you alluded already, in the current way of assembling versus what we see right now in the next gen vehicle of more people that can work simultaneously on the next generation vehicles, with all processes coming together at the end. But the slide that sort of caps it all is this one, the 40% footprint, which was being envisioned as something like impossible to get to. But also here, the cost of goods sold already being announced of 50% reduction in cost, which is spectacular. We talked about a little bit of the innovations that goes into it, but also the size that is a little bit different. So yeah, for us after seeing this presentation, but also what we see right here with the smaller powertrains and factories and everything that goes into it, from chips to motors to everything that is happening here, finally comes into fruition. So that's very exciting thing to to experience, also with the 4680 cells and all the underlying technologies that we see at Tesla. But talking to those engineers, Brian, what were the things that you were surprised by hearing following Tesla already for such a long time?
I don't know if much surprised me because my interview style is to try and anticipate all the answers because especially if you know they're going to be squirrely on something and not want to answer, you have to ask it a different way. And so that's like how I managed to get the answer that it is front wheel drive, was by, I tried asking a really good question and the question was too good and they wouldn't answer it. So I asked a really dumb question and it was so dumb that they had to correct it. But the thing is, when you're designing a car, let's say I could say to you, look, I need you to design a car for me, but here's one of the things that you can do to make it cheaper. No one will ever do a 0 to 60 run, ever, not once. You go, oh, never? No, never. And they're never going to take a hard corner. Like literally never, maybe once ever as an evasive maneuver. And you'd say, oh, well, if that's the case, I can put the smallest motor possible in it. If that's the case, I can make a battery that doesn't have the ability to do a bunch of drag runs. And if I'm going to do all that, that means I need less cooling, less, climate control for the whole system. But if I'm going to do less climate control, that means I'll probably have less ability to heat and cool the cabin. Oh, don't worry. The cabin is the size of 2 people. Done. They go, oh, gosh. Well, yeah, I can cut out a whole lot of costs. And if I'm going to do that, that means I can have a smaller battery. And if I'm going to do that and the smaller everything, that means now our suspension is cheaper. Our brakes are cheaper. Our tires and wheels are cheaper. We don't have to make a car that goes, 150 miles an hour. We just pick the highest speed limit in our markets, and that is how fast the car goes. It doesn't need to be able to be unlocked to go faster. So everything gets cheaper. And you say, well, if we're not making it do all those crazy things, then the safety gets easier too. Yeah, it does. This car will always be driven like a grandma. So imagine if you could get away with that. If you as the designer knew that your customer was never going to floor it and see how fast this baby will go. You start to realize that you may have been asking the wrong questions in the first place.
Yeah. And that's very exciting. And in terms of synergies in materials that are already in the Model 3 and Y, do you see leverage there?
No. There was very little overlap in parts. I mean, the screen is a different size. The controls are different. The dashboard's different. The real thing would be like the heat pump system, I imagine, is similar, but really it's just been learning lessons. And the Model 3 and Y are still on 12 volt. We asked them about this being 48 volt, and without confirming it directly, they said Tesla is all in on 48 volt. And of course it'll be 48 volt because it reduces the amount of copper in the vehicle. It just makes everything work a little bit better. It makes it so that because of the way the connections work in the 48 volt system, it allows for unboxed to happen. So I asked an engineer from Ford to look at unboxed and tell me, is this crazy or can it be done? And if it can be done, how come no one's ever done it? And he said, oh, it's been the goal of automotive building forever, but it's impossible because there are systems that run the full length of the car, and you can't if you tried to build a Ford this way and had part of the wiring harness in the back and part in the front and part in the middle, how would you join them? It'd be a nightmare. Well, the answer is with little Tesla connectors that we've seen the patents for, because it's 48 volt. It's basically a LAN, and so it works. You can do that. And he said, yeah, but you still can't do it because the hydraulic lines need to run the full length of the car too for the brakes. And I said, well, what about brake by wire? He said, yeah, that exists. It's not in wide use. It could work. But the problem with that is most cars don't provide the voltage necessary to run something like brake by wire or steer by wire. And I said, well, what if it had 48 volt? He goes, okay, that could do it. But there's one last piece to the puzzle missing, which is you'd need a fail-safe. If the brakes somehow malfunction, I said, what about regen? He's like, oh, that's your fail-safe, isn't it? So all of these pieces come together. We haven't had confirmation on brake-by-wire, but if the only thing that needs to run the full length is the hydraulics for the brakes, it's possible. It becomes possible for the first time.
Does the Cybertruck has brake-by-wire? Or?
No, it
Steer
does
by
not.
wire.
It
So
has
that
steer by
same
wire.
argument can be extended, but I know for a fact that the UNECE is very risk averse. So they want to have fail safes built in everything and everywhere. But the proof is in the pudding, and Cybertruck is already proving that it can happen and that it's safe.
Yes, and if you and for the best thing for a failsafe is for it to use a completely different method, and if the electronic brakes go out, but the drivetrain is capable of safely bringing it all the way back to zero, that's fine. That's a good solution.
And that's essentially what driving a Model 3 is: one pedal drive and no brakes, almost no brakes.
Very little. I owned my car for probably a half hour before I ever had to actually use the brake pedal.
Yeah, I rarely use it as well.
And do you think these new innovations that are being pushed with the Cybertruck will also transfer to the Model 3 and the Model Y lines, hence the new models that are being announced? We as a group has been speculating about those new bundles, that it could easily be just Model 3s and Ys to keep things simple, but then also smaller and more efficient. Is that in the round of possibilities?
I think your theory is the most likely theory. They want something that they can get out the door quickly. I think what we're going to see is something like the Giga Shanghai built Mexico edition Model 3, which I think they were selling for $5,000 less. Just remove the rear screen, put in cloth instead of the fake leather, and just cut a few fancy things out, and you can get enough savings to make it work. The crazy thing to me is, you remember all the times we've seen Tesla cut prices, sometimes by thousands of dollars all at once. And the analysts will look at it and say, well, this may be great for short-term demand, but just wait until the financials come in and we see how bad they're losing money. And then the financials come in and they didn't lose money because they had that much cost of goods sold reduction. It is an advantage that they uniquely have. Looking back 10 years ago, a lot of companies said EVs are going to be the future because they are easier to build. They have fewer parts. They are not as complicated as a gas-powered vehicle would be. But somehow, along the way, all the manufacturers forgot that, and they can't make these things for less than $50,000 at their cost, and they can't sell them at a profit. These are simple. These should be easier and cheaper to build, but somehow they're not. And a lot of that's been the batteries, which have gotten cheaper, but they're going to struggle with that. So Tesla has found ways to actually enjoy the cost savings, while others seem to be stuck. And the problem they get, and this will hopefully loop back around and answer the question, when you look at a company like Ford or General Motors or Volkswagen, one of the problems they have is that they've always done things this way, and change is hard. And so steering the ship in a new direction is hard. But if you look at Tesla, they have some of that problem as well. Why are they still making the models S and X when the refresh was not very refreshing, and they're not all that different? They're still using Japanese-made Panasonic 18650 battery cells. Why aren't they using at least 2170s, let alone 4680s? And the answer is because change costs money and change is difficult. And we're still running one full shift. And as long as that one full shift remains profitable, why change? It's not like a big change would make it sell like a Model 3. It probably would never do that. So why do it? So they end up tethered to their own ways, and change is hard. Are we going to see more unboxed methods coming to the 3 and Y? I don't think so. I don't think it's possible. I think the way it's designed prohibits that. But future models, I think we're going to see the unboxed philosophy starting from day one, so that it can be built that way. And we're seeing how simple the Cybercab is. It is reduced body parts. The original Model 3 had 380 body elements that made up the main body. The structural Model Y had 180. They cut more than half, which is amazing. But the Cybercab has 80 body elements. 80. Yeah. That's the entire body. Wow. That's insane. I was telling someone that, and they said, well, you could sell that as a kit. You could make it at home if it's that few parts. So every part of it can be easier. But getting even someone as nimble as Tesla, making the switch to 48 volt is very difficult. Making the switch to, a new line or a new factory is difficult and expensive. So even though they're the new agile guys in town, they still struggle with some of the problems that the legacy car companies have.
Hey, and regarding that change, of course, production lines need to be in place or adjusted, and the reduction in footprint that needs to first take place before we enter into production, of course. And since you're also very well informed about gigafactories, how far are they? Are those production lines already under construction to be able to get that Cybercab into production quickly? And second question following after that, what's your estimate when we'll see production start and then later on deliveries?
Okay, those are great questions. I have not seen anything that would lead me to believe that the factory is definitely, that the space for the manufacturing is already definitely underway. We've seen equipment being loaded into Giga Texas, where we believe the first line will be built, but we do not know that that equipment is for this project. And I think it would be too early for that. I think what we'll see is absolutely no movement on a factory space for it until they determine that FSD is absolutely solved internally. They can't roll it out the way that Waymo and Cruise and others have, where they have a heavy reliance on teleoperators. Teleoperators are expensive. Now, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration has a regulation that says you must have teleoperators in case of emergency. That's cheap. That's affordable. That's basically having like GM has OnStar, where you can press a button where the airbags deploy and the voice shows up saying, hey, I see airbags deployed. Is everybody okay? That is very cheap, but teleoperation is expensive, and Tesla cannot afford it because a lot of people have already paid for this product. Some only paid $6,000, $8,000 for it. How quickly would you burn through that $6,000 with the pay of a teleoperator? It just doesn't make sense. So as soon as it's done, they will get to work on that. And I would expect production within 18 months of it working. And it could be faster, but I don't think it needs to be, because those 18 months would be used with your car and my car to solve all the problems with the app and the logistics and all of those things that we would need to have solved anyway. It's not like it's not like the market will grow too slowly. It will not grow too slowly. But what will happen is, while our cars are out there validating the network, proving the concept, we're going to see this monster sneaking up behind us, which is the Cybercab. And when it gets out, it's going to be insane.
Yeah, that also, Brian, like the magic number of Tesla was always 20 million cars in 2030, right? So do you think there will be more gradual process or a big leap when that Cybercab will be announced?
It'll be gradual,
or being in production.
Right. It'll be gradual until the Cybercab, because we would need to be seeing a lot of new models. We'd need to be seeing new factories. Earlier, you were showing the graphic of how much smaller the factory can be. And what's funny is when I looked at that, I thought 40% smaller. Nonsense. I don't believe it, because But then I realized, no, they mean 40% smaller than another Tesla factory, not than another legacy factory.
Yeah.
You guys have seen how big automotive factories are. They are expansive. They are massive. And then, but what you may not have looked at is, right, but how many cars does this factory build? And the answer is usually a number that is surprisingly low. When you compare that to, say, Giga Shanghai, which is about 1 million square meters and produces 1 million cars a year. 1 million cars out of 1 million square meters. Every square meter of that factory produces a car a year. That is, if other companies could do that, they would be in a different position. They would not be in the trouble they're in. And this is going to do even more. This is going to reduce that by 40%. So, and when you look at the way, at all the things that are not needed in a car like this, you understand how it's possible.
Because 2030 is just 5 years away, right? So it's
the 20 million.
Like so.
Yeah, 20 million's done. That's not happening by 2030, I don't think. But Cybercab could change it. But if Cybercab doesn't enter production, if it's solved, by the end of 2025, which is what Elon is hoping, then the factory would be 2027-ish, 28. Yeah, you're not hitting 20 million at that point. But But at that point, it wouldn't matter, and it would be looking at the wrong question. It's like how computer manufacturers in the 90s used to tell you how many megahertz was, and that was the only metric that mattered, even though it wasn't the best metric for measuring performance. They're trying to get us away from that. It doesn't matter as much how many cars you make as how many miles those cars do. And if you've got one car that's out 15, 20 hours a day instead of my car out 1 hour a day, half hour a day, you're getting more utilization. You're taking more of the gas cars off the road that way.
Yeah, that's interesting that you bring it up, Brian, because I wanted to ask you a question about that. Because we've been talking about reducing the cost of the manufacturing, which I also have a question about, but also reducing the cost of actually building the car. But you also talked a little bit about the reduction of, or even the improvement of efficiency as well. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? Because I think that's the most important part, because the number of miles are also going to increase with the car. So
the efficiency of the car itself, of the actual car. So So first of all, Tesla has legendary heating and cooling systems in their car. Years ago, if you look at like a Chevy Bolt, it has, I think, 5 different coolant loops. Each one was designed and made by a different department that didn't talk to any of the other departments, except to argue about who gets which space under the hood. Then Tesla came along and had the super bottle, which was this revolution in heating and cooling under the hood. And I thought, wow, they've done it. They've solved it, and move on to the next thing. And then a year and a half, 2 years later, we see on the Model Y, super bottle's gone. Oh no, that's 2018. We're on to the Octavalve, which is revolutionary still. And then if you look at the Model S Plaid, it's got an even different version with more loops in it to do more things for performance, where it's cooling the brakes. So it is, this will have, of course, very good management. But in terms of efficiency, they've thought of everything. Of course, it has a low coefficient of drag, but one of the ways they've done that is there's no mirrors protruding from the side, not even little camera ones, because the cameras are already flush to the vehicle. They don't need that. The fact that it has a solid roof instead of glass is part of the efficiency. Not only does it reduce cost, reduce weight, but it also reduces the amount of climate control you need, because the sun isn't beating in and the heat isn't wicking out. It also means there's no fingerprints from grubby kids that need to be cleaned in between uses. It works on every level. It also helps with noise reduction. So this is a huge benefit, getting rid of the glass. And on the efficiency, the sound system, they cut it in half. They cut it in half to fill sound in a smaller space, and it sounds better than it would in our cars, and our cars sound fantastic. So on efficiency, they've thought of absolutely everything, because the car doesn't need to go super fast. It's got smaller, cheaper motors. I asked if they're going to be the motors made without rare earth materials, and they said that is still the philosophy that Tesla is pursuing. So whether that means that they will be that way right out of the gate or if they'll come later, it is clearly an objective. But that, is efficiency. The size of the wheels has to do with rolling resistance. It's got big 18-inch wheels on the front, R215/60 18s. And those were chosen because the larger diameter provides better rolling resistance efficiency. But they didn't go too big because the bigger you make them, the more aerodynamic drag it creates. So they put 18s on the front and 21-inch wheels on the back because back there's less aero drag and the back is a little bit narrower. So the whole thing is teardrop shaped. Every part of it, anything you could think of, is another element of efficiency. And they've got it all working.
That's unreal, actually.
It's amazing what you're all I mean, it's just a whole list of things. And
any system in the car you think of, we can look at it and see how they've done it cheaper and better.
Yeah, I also liked you talked about the doors and how that also helps removing the B pillar and those kind of things. I've seen you had a big answer on all the questions people ask about the doors. Mm-hmm. Maybe elaborate a little bit on why did they choose for this kind of design? What's the reason?
Yeah. So on the doors, people saw them and said, wow, that's really cool. But, prototypes are meant to look really cool. This isn't going to make it into the final. And we've seen that. If you've been to an auto show, you'll see some really amazing vehicles. And then you get to the showroom 2 years later and you're like, that's not what I saw. That's a joke. But Tesla famously doesn't do that. If you look at the original Model S, which was on display for a time at the Peterson Museum in Los Angeles, I went up and studied it. I looked at it really closely to spot the differences. And there were quite a few. From a distance, you wouldn't notice. And when you bought your Model S, you thought, yep, this is exactly what I saw at the unveiling. It isn't. It's slightly different. They made some little changes for manufacturability, safety, whatever it might be.
Same goes for Model 3.
Same goes for Model 3. Same goes for the Cybertruck. You and I can spot the difference, but the average person cannot.
No.
To me, the changes are substantial, but thematically, it's the same. So I asked the engineer, these doors, they're pretty crazy. Are these the final doors? I mean, are you going to change? Because these are it. These are it. Hey, this car is going to look as similar to the final version as the Cybertruck looks to the prototype. We're not changing it. This is what it is. So why have weird scissor doors like that? The answer comes from what the door is for. We need a big, big door opening because it's easier to get in and out. That's the whole key, is we need it as accessible for as many people as possible, and a huge door hole solves that. But once you've got a huge door hole, now you've got a huge door. Where do you put it? Where do you move it when the door opens? Do you throw it out into traffic, into walls? I'm sure all of us have been in a car at some point where the doors were just kind of too long and kind of a hassle when you open them. Old Cadillacs were famous for that because they would make cars that were, a half a block long, and they would still only have two doors that were ridiculous. But they would, so on the doors, they have to put them somewhere, so they scissor up, and it makes it very easy to get in and out. People have said, well, I'm worried that my grandma or whoever who has limited mobility will struggle to get in and out. And I say, you won't. When you get a chance to sit in it, you will get it. It is as easy as getting on and off a couch because it's a bench seat, not a bucket. You just twist to the side, put your feet on the ground, and stand up. That's how you get out. And so it makes it very easy. And of course, I've had to deal with the people saying, well, it's too dangerous to have a door that opens that way. Right. Doors can hit people. That's a thing. I know you want me to carpet the world, but I insist you just put on some slippers because
we can't idiot-proof anything.
Yeah, we can't. Yeah, we can make it idiot resistant, but the problem with trying to make something idiot proof is they just keep building better idiots. So what we've got to do then is and the car knows where its doors are in space at any given time. So it won't, bonk into your garage or whatever. But really the question is, it's the wrong question. Well, this door is going to be inconvenient where I park. Why are you getting out of the car where you park? Just get out of the car and let the car.
That's auto park.
Yeah, go do its own thing. It doesn't need you.
Yeah, on the one hand, it's always like people come up with very clever things of how the door should work. I really think that Tesla engineers has not been thinking about that, you know.
Yeah, well, and that's the other thing is I've had people arguing with me about the tires and the rolling resistance and the diameters, and they're saying, boy, you know, with the replacement car, I don't think, Brian, can you crunch the numbers? And I started to, and I realized Tesla's already crunched these numbers. I'm not smarter than they are very good at that. That's their whole thing. So they're all, yeah. And I see people not understanding how this is going to change everything. I saw a gentleman who said, my church, I'm going to try and convince them to buy 6 of these to pick up the little old ladies on Sunday. And I said, and just park them the rest of the week? You don't understand what this is. If you're going to do that, send them out all week. And he goes, yeah, and then on Sunday I can have, I said, why? Send 20, requests for Cybercabs to grab everybody. Don't own any, use the money you made all week to bring everyone to church on Sunday. Do that. The idea of parking lots. Well, what if I park too close to someone? Why are you parking? There should be a whole Cybercab section where the cars just jam in there without lines, because the lines are for us. They don't need lines. They don't need in the future. You can imagine a city operating without stop signs because their cars are talking to each other. The signs are for us, for the full meat driving, because meat is really bad at driving.
It's our questions in the category of like, what if the horse needs to make a dump? How are we going to replace that?
Why? Yes. What if my car gets sleepy? Are you still thinking of horses? I feel like you're still thinking about horses.
Yeah. So Brian, I'm sorry, but I'm full of questions still. But one of them was about efficiency, and I saw a post of Alojo. He said the car is also a lower vehicle than normal, and he actually said a lower vehicle is more efficient. A more efficient car drives less energy per mile, and the less energy per mile, you need a smaller battery. So could you elaborate a little bit on the kilowatt hours per miles?
Yes.
Sure. What has been said to you about that? Is that
sure? Yeah. All that stuff. Yes. So I was surprised years ago when I found that the lower the car, the better the efficiency, and it's because the taller you get, the more turbulence you get under the vehicle, which induces drag. Tesla Model S famously would lower itself all the way down at highway speeds for maximum efficiency, and then one day a tow hitch came off of a truck and got wedged underneath a Model S, punctured the skid plate, and caused a fire. So Tesla said, okay, we've got a recall. Next time you're in for service, or if you want to schedule it, we've got titanium plates for the bottom. Oh, and also everybody's car rides 1 inch higher at freeway speed now. We changed that. The update went out this morning. Amazing.
Problem solved.
Problem solved. So that 1 inch of clearance is all they needed, and they solved it over the air. So the lower car helps. I asked them, I said, so I hear that you're getting 5.5 miles per kilowatt hour. And they said, yes. I said, no, I don't believe you. A Model 3 can already get, if you're driving conservatively, 4 miles to the kilowatt hour. And you're telling me you're only getting up to 5.5. And he said, 5.5 is what we are saying. We are not allowed to say a number other than 5.5. That is the lowest, the worst number it will get. There is, in my mind, no way it is going to be that inefficient, because it weighs 1,000 pounds less than a Model 3. It's doing less work. It's the coefficient of drag is not the right number to look at. The total drag is the number to look at. It is a very small profile to cut through the wind, and it's going to be mostly used in cities, I imagine, like all taxis are, where it would get the most efficiency anyway. So the efficiency, Yeah, low speed, lots of regen. Wind resistance doesn't come into play as much. It's going to be. I think. I think the numbers we're seeing are are misleading, and that they're actually going to be substantially better.
So,
Brian, do you have
oh,
any idea why they're sandbagging on the numbers? Because they're basically doing it for a couple of years now. So what's your view on that?
I don't know. I think maybe it's to throw off the competition is the only thing I can really come up with.
Yeah, since like they want to have benchmarks and then come out with a number that tackles that benchmark. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, back in the days when they still had to raise money, they were already introducing new models and were very vocal about what they would achieve and how good they would be. And nowadays everything's like sandbagged up to the max, like production numbers, these kind of details. So
Well, when you get a reputation for over-promising and under-delivering, it can work against you. And we've seen, there are still people on social media who say Elon has never, ever made one of his timelines, and he has. I mean, the first phase of Giga Shanghai opened on time. They said we're going to build it in a year, and not only did they build it in a year, vehicles were rolling out on month 11.
Yeah.
When the Model Y was unveiled, they said second half of next year, and it came out in the first half of the next year.
Yeah.
So, and when they said second half, we all said, oh, so end of the year, maybe into the next.
it's
No,
late September.
it was 365 days from unveiling until production, first deliveries. So there are, and of course you see in Shanghai, they would say, for the longest time they said capacity 450,000, and you're looking at it going, you're at like 650,000 now. So
the production numbers in their Q report says like something like 600 plus, or those kind of numbers it says. So they're still sandbagging quite a lot. But I actually did a deep dive on it and I posted it on X. And when you look at the numbers, so what you say, Brian, Tesla is all about numbers. They know their numbers in and out. I think they're the most numbers-driven company in the world. And every time Elon has it about, let's say, delivery numbers, production numbers, and maybe pressure on it in the last 2 years, they were always spot on. The only thing he has not delivered on in time were like software things or things they really had to develop, which is always unknown, right? You have a hunch for when it's being solved, but it's always a question what you run up to. You want to say something?
Oh, I did. The thing with it is Elon gets a lot of criticism for FSD not being complete. But if you go back to 2010, there were 24 companies around the world who said, we will have it solved by 2020, and so will 5 of our competitors. Everyone believed that. Everyone in the industry believed that. And we only criticize one company for not doing it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And then on the cost side of things, so if you now look at the cost side of or the cost price for Tesla for a Model 3, somewhere between $32,000 to $37,000, do you have any view on like the cost price for the next gen model or the Cybercab?
So on Cybercab, it is my belief that at volume, it'll probably cost well under 20,000. You start getting into parts that can't be cost reduced as much, where you start hitting limits of fixed costs. Tires are buying, you can buy in volume. That'll get you a better price, but only to an extent. They're already buying in volume. But I think well under 20,000 will be the cost. But I said, 25 grand for the Cybercab, does that include the software? And he was confused. It has to have the software, right? I said, yeah, but I thought maybe you would sell the vehicle and then lease us the software. That's a thing that businesses have done in business to business transactions before. He said, no, whatever the price is would include the software. And I said, so 25,000 would, he goes, I'm not saying 25,000. I'm saying whatever we actually sell it for would include the software. So I think early on, they would be crazy to sell it for less than the most they can get. Tesla always says that when a model is new, charge what the market will bear and reduce the price over time. So if they come out of the gate selling it at 50,000, I think they'll get a million customers. Yeah, they will have more orders than they can fill. And that means that for every one they sell, they can keep one for themselves. And that begins the flywheel of just pure cash generation. Unlike you look at someone like Waymo, they're going to buy a $50,000 Hyundai and then pay another $50,000 to change it into something it was never meant to be, and then sell it. Well, right there. So if you're spending 100,000 on it, on a car that will, if you're lucky, go 150, 200,000 miles, let's say 200,000. If you're lucky, it'll go 200,000. Yeah. That means, how many of those miles are going to be paid miles? Probably half. So that means that the first dollar per mile goes just to the cost of buying the car. Meanwhile, Tesla either got theirs for free or sold it to you for 25 or 50,000. It becomes impossible to compete on price. And I imagine there will be cities in the world where they say, look, we are tired of the competition being unfair. That means the prices are regulated. Everybody charges the same per mile. Well, great. That just means Tesla's going to make a fortune and everyone else is going to lose their shirts on it, because at a fixed price, you've got just a more efficient, cheaper product.
Yeah, and if Waymo is the future, then the future doesn't look like the future, but it looks very lame, right? So
those sensors are so elegant. Can barely tell.
And so cost efficient.
I think when we look back in history and we study sort of that Waymo thing, then it becomes very obvious that they made a lot of wrong choices in their approach there.
Waymo looks like those Flugtag competitions where people come out with all their crazy contraptions and see if they can fly.
Yeah, but it got all to do with, like, they just wanted to solve an issue, and they're like looking at the vehicle. It's very much like Google started out with sensor suites on the cars and trying to get a grasp of what autonomy is really like. But Tesla, and that's what strikes me time and time again with Tesla, is they have a very clear design intent, and everything is tailored to achieve that goal without compromises. And that's everybody ridicules them for it, but in the end, they're blowing everyone away when they finally reach it, and they do actually reach it.
I've seen people, I've met people, I've talked to people this week who are still saying it will never work without LiDAR. And I can tell you that these are people who do not know anything with certainty. They're certainly not in the industry, but you've seen companies in China, autonomous development companies, getting rid of their LiDAR, saying, you know what, it's true. This is expensive and it's no longer adding the benefits we thought it would. Maybe they're wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. But to say anything with certainty that something definitely won't work, I had a comment on my channel that said self-driving will not be solved in our lifetime. So I assume he's got some kind of terminal cancer, because it's going to be solved in my lifetime. And to which I responded with that quote from the title of a New York Times article 100 and some years ago that said, "Powered flight will not be achieved for at least 1 million to 10 million years." And it would take that much time of continuous engineering effort. And the Wright brothers' first flight was less than 90 days later. So I was like, wow, he's channeling the ghost of Dan O'Dowd.
The real Dan O'Dowd.
The real. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Brian, it's a bit of a sidestep. But your work on this Cybercab projects makes me very excited about the citizen journalist that we are all pursuing on X. I think you did a very diligent job in talking to the engineers and get first-hand information. And if all our news sources can be like that in the future, how excited is that?
Well, it's scary is what it is, because the problem with citizen journalism is it doesn't pay very well. I make less money than, any of the analysts and most of the reporters out there. And that's unsustainable. So you have to start asking, if somebody is providing all this for free, who is actually paying them? Because maybe, and I've seen a number of EV channels that suddenly are really big into some brands. Oh my gosh, I am now all in on the Volkswagen ID4. So really, because you hated them a week ago, and then 12 months and 1 day later, they're like, you know what, I actually don't really like Volkswagen that much. So who is paying for those citizen journalists? We can do good work. It's just difficult and expensive and time consuming. Yeah. And the real thing that's closing the gap between traditional journalism and, citizen journalism is that traditional journalism keeps cutting their budgets. And if their pay keeps going down, you've got people like Ellie in Space, who was a news reporter on television and made no money at all. And finally one day said, you know what, I'm done with this. And she makes more money as a citizen journalist than she ever did inside the machine. So it's coming, it's changing, and hopefully it's a change for the better.
Yeah, but Kees.
Yeah, well,
I just had my fingers crossed.
Oh yeah. Okay, good. Yeah, no, I agree. It's a sidestep, of course, that ties into all the developments that we're seeing recently on the X platform. What would be your span of time sitting in a cybercab? How are you going to spend your time instead of commuting?
Because I work from home. So how am I going to spend my time? I am the driver in the family. I am the one behind the wheel. And because I have FSD, it means my journeys are not painful. It means when I went down to see the Cybercab, it was 12 hours to Santa Rosa, another 2 hours from there to San Jose, each direction. I didn't lose my mind. I didn't, driving, full meat driving is very stressful. And when you do it all day, you need a whole day to recover. With this, I just arrived a little sleepy. I could have a snack and go to bed. But what I would do is enjoy the time. I would actually maybe watch a movie. I would get work done. I could have made all the videos that I made at charging stops. I could have made them in the car. I could have scripted them more thoroughly. It would have been like having an assistant. It literally would be like having you would have a chauffeur at that point. And think how much more productive you could be, or how much more leisure time you could have, or both. It's not just about doing more work. It is about having control of your time. And that's what I'm looking forward to.
Would be so exciting to, after a week of work, you just step in, have a nap, and you wake up in Paris, for example, for us people here in Amsterdam. And one of the topics we talk about as well, maybe a little bit on FSD. We are in Europe, and Amsterdam still don't have FSD. While we have almost, I think, 1 million Teslas on the road that will be suddenly enabled with FSD. What are your thoughts on Tesla's current fleet, and especially relevant for Florian, who has 4,500 of these cars? Do you have any recent thoughts on how that is going to be levered?
Sure. So the first part of it is, why is Europe or any particular country, why isn't it allowed in my area? And the answer is, well, it's not done. When it is done, when it can be demonstrated in one place, it will spread like wildfire. There was concerns that, well, what if my state doesn't allow it, but the neighboring state does? Well, everybody over 55 is going to move to that state because they know their days of driving are numbered, and they can afford to make a move like that. And they want a chauffeur. Everybody would love a chauffeur. So once it works, I'm confident legislation, regulations around the world will catch up quickly. Now, I've heard a lot of people saying, well, hardware 3 is never going to do it. And I say, on what is your confidence based? Because you're not an engineer and you're not inside the project. You can't know that. So, well, Elon said, no. The question was, if it doesn't work, what will you do? And he said, fine, if then we'd replace it. That doesn't mean it's not going to work. For the longest time, my car is hardware 4. For the longest time, all the updates went first to hardware 3 and then to hardware 4. And now it's flipped. I know an owner who has a legacy Model S who just got an FSD update a month ago. And he was, wow, they're still supporting hardware 2. So I think hardware 3 will get there. It's like anything we were talking about earlier. When you design a product, first you overbuild it until it works, and then you cut it back. And with Tesla, when they make a car, first they cut everything until they've cut too much, and they have to add something back. In this case, once autonomy is solved, they'll know how much they can scale it back, and how much more compute was actually available the whole time through efficiency. So I think if it works on hardware 4, I think it'll work on hardware 3. I think Florian's fleet is safe for now.
Hey, and regarding like the cutting stuff and then rebuilding it to what is necessary, we're seeing the elimination of the steering wheel and the pedals right now. And lately we saw a great post and video by Farzad, who mentioned a joystick or like controller like steering mechanisms. What are your thoughts on that?
So there is a control like that for developers. That's how they get it into just the exact right place in showrooms and car shows. That will never go out to customers. You will never be able to drive the car that way. It would require you to get a whole second driver's license. You'd have to take a whole second driving test. Farzad says a lot of things. For some reason, that's the one show that I've never been invited on. And it's frustrating because I see him with some conclusions that I would push back on. And while that is one way you can move a car, the way you and I would move it is with the app. The way I already move it with Smart Summon. I sent my family out to the car and said, "Oh, I'll be there in a minute. You guys hop in the car without me." And then I pulled the car up to the front door with them in it, and they were amused. The kids were more amused than my wife. She was less amused.
And actually, there's no point if you have another think about it, because if you just have the big starting point and the end point of where you want that vehicle located in the end, the car will figure it out itself by using neural nets and vision.
Absolutely. And so it's a developer toolkit kind of item that isn't going to make it into there's no there's no need for it. And it you want to idiot proof things as much as you can. And I've seen how my parents and aunts and uncles did in driving games on the Nintendo. I do not wish to give them controls to a car in real life.
Nope.
And Brian, how do you think about? I think Monroe said it on one of the podcasts as well. He's like, "Hey, you stupid! The Cybercab is the Model 2. It's just putting in the steering wheel and some pedals." How do you look at that?
It isn't. It absolutely is not. And I know that he said that, but I don't know why he said that, because it is. So the NV91 was the human-driven version of the Cybercab. It was canceled in April, and very visibly high profile, it was canceled. This would require, so first you would need the steering wheel and the pedals, and then of course you need to redesign all the airbags because they're different. And if you want it to have a steering wheel that's removable, now you're going to need new laws to be passed permitting that. But now let's talk about the vehicle. We need to add the mirrors. Easy enough, right? Oh, but we also need wiring to the mirrors. We need a new wiring harness. Oh, and now we can't just limit the speed to 85 because it's a car. So we're going to need different motors and different gearing. Oh, and that means we're going to need different brakes, I guess, too. Oh, and if we're doing that, now we've got to change the cooling system because it needs to be able to cool for 0 to 60 runs, which means we're probably going to need a bigger cooling system and a bigger battery. Now it weighs more, so we're going to have to change the tires, the wheels, the brakes, the suspension. Guys, that's a different car. What I just described is a completely different car. And I know what Sandy's saying. Yes, you could add a steering wheel to it and make it work, but it would drive like a golf cart, and no one's going to permit that. No one's going to accept that. So Sandy is very good at engineering, but he's not infallible, and this is one that he got wrong.
I think it's I feel like we're sort of trying to explain the future to sort of, let's say, people that have not been seeing it yet. And that's always the challenge. In your X handle also says what is it, futurist or
Futurologist? Mm-hmm.
Futurologist. What kind of predictions do you have more for us? Having that title.
So last thing I wanted to say on Sandy, because I don't want to make it sound like I don't love Sandy. I love him to death. I've had him on the show many times. Sandy is looking at what can be done. And yes, it can be done. I'm looking at what will be done, and it will not. And I saw obstacles that Sandy didn't. And then I talked to the engineers who confirmed this ain't getting controls. So what do I see in the future? A complete rethink. The biggest thing I think we're going to see is parking lots are going to have to be reimagined, because if everyone's getting dropped off at the front door, we need to just change the flow. We need a separate lane for just people getting in and out of cabs. So that's one. But what was a clarification you were going to add?
Yeah, maybe to help you on this difficult question from Damien. Maybe I can break it down a little bit by asking you, how do you think they will actually scale their production to 2 million at the end of 2026?
So
it's an easy question.
So easy. So you can already get little efficiencies from every line that exists. Shanghai does not have a lot of room to grow in terms of capacity. A little bit here and there. That's a tiny bit. Berlin has the opportunity to add more shifts and more lines. All they would need is, I think if they were to introduce Model 3 production in Berlin, they could substantially increase the output of that factory. And then in Texas, there's a lot of, they could add more shifts, they could add more lines. But a big place they're going to add it is in the Cybertruck. Cybertruck production is still low. It's like 1,000 or 2 a week. They can double it. They can triple it. That's a big room for growth there. So really it's in, and then of course, if we do get a lower cost 3 or Y or something like that. And, I'd seen rumors about this. Oh, the Tesla Model Q. I think that's bogus. I don't believe it. It certainly wouldn't be named that. And it is a classic single source rumor that spread like wildfire. No, I've seen it 10 places. Right. They all say, according to. That's a single source rumor.
Yeah.
Some of those turn out to be true. The vast majority do not. I err on the side of I don't believe them. So yeah, the path to increasing, just modestly increasing production over the next few years is to get Cybertruck deliveries up to 500,000 or more, increase the number of shifts, therefore output at Texas and Berlin, and then just incremental improvements in Fremont and Shanghai before we see the expansion in Berlin for the semi or the Cybercab.
And
yeah, so are you because that's something that Elon said on the Q3 earnings, that actually the Cybercab itself will get to 2 million production end of 2026. So how is that gonna ramp? How is that?
I'll be very surprised to see by the end of 26, even a run rate of 2 million, I think, is unlikely. It would be crazy, but it's not impossible, especially if we solve it in the next 6 months. If in the next 6 months they pull the trigger and say, get those factories going, even then we wouldn't hit that kind of run rate by the end of 26. But the way they will be able to build quickly is once the line is design locked, I asked them what kind of battery it will have, and they said it is battery agnostic. I said, where will it be built? And they said globally. So that tells me that batteries don't need to be a bottleneck. You can use Blade batteries in China. You can use NMC in the US. You can use whatever is available and get them out. So the answer to how will they get to 2 to 4 million? Because I think why not make 4 million a year, especially if you're making them at multiple factories around the world? And the answer is it's so simple to build. It's going to snap together like Lego. I think having more than one factory moving at any kind of reasonable pace will get you to millions of Cybercabs.
And a very future-oriented question here, Brian, is Elon talked about leveraging the compute power of the Cybercabs as a sort of AWS for all the compute that Tesla and the AIs need. Did you share any thoughts on that with engineers, or have you been thinking about that lately?
I didn't think to ask them anything about that because I haven't been thinking about that lately. And when it gets to the AI side, I do my best, but I recognize my weaknesses, and that is absolutely one of them. I have, no strong proficiency there.
Yeah. I think that compute power is a very underrated thing, because driving and the efficiency, exactly what you say. First, they sort of over-engineer the thing, and then it will become more and more efficient in hindsight, right?
Right.
And I think the compute power, if you think about how powerful hardware 4 or hardware 5 is going to be, and that can, if that can operate all day, because you are operating your car like half an hour a day. Cybercab will maybe 10 or 20 fold that, but then we still have plenty of hours left that the car is basically doing nothing. So
well, let's actually talk about that, because we're talking about the future. Let's talk about all the ways your car can make you money. Of course, you could rent it out on Turo for someone who wishes to take your car out of town. But you could also just send it out as a cab, so it's in town. But now let's talk about that. Could you rent out the processing power? Sure, why not? And if you've got LFP batteries, could you just leave it plugged in and sell power to the grid all day? Why not? The car doesn't necessarily have to leave your driveway to make money. And those are two big, crazy ways that you could do it. So, yeah, I could imagine seeing someone like Florin just having cars, at a warehouse plugged in as stationary storage. And not necessarily the ones you have now, but ones you would get in the future, where you would buy a car, and 5 years later, 8 years later, when the warranty's getting close to expiring, you sell this brand new car with 100 miles on it. That's just, I've just been using it as a battery. What a business opportunity that would be! What a savings for the grid that would introduce.
Yep.
Yeah, amazing, and it's already presented, and that makes it so exciting. What are you looking forward to in the short term as announcements or things you will be listening carefully for?
This year has already been so exciting. I don't know what to ask for. I feel like
Santa Claus is coming. So
Santa's already been here. We've gotten so much. What would I like to see? It's all things we're going to see in the next 6 months. I expect to see clarity on what a lower cost model would be, if that's going to be a little, if it's going to be something new or interesting. And it could be like an A series kind of thing, where it takes everything you loved about the Model 3 or Y and just makes it a little bit shorter. It could be that, but they wouldn't tell us until it's time, because somebody would hold off on buying because they want that. So I expect to see that. I'm looking forward to the next quarterly earnings, where we get to find out if the current price cuts and incentives cut into the margin unacceptably. But even if the margin is compressed a bit, I'm not worried about it, because right now we're in a phase where we're building the last steamships. And as cool as they are, they're still steamships, and they're going to be, scrapped in 20 years, and we'll never look back. So I guess what I'm looking forward to most is version 13. I'll be getting it someday soon. Could be tomorrow, could be next month. I don't know. But I would very much like to see how close we really are.
Yeah, it would be amazing if we can invite you again on the show, because we're still tied to our wheels with our hands, right? We cannot experience full self-driving. we're planning a trip to Austin very soon as well to experience it ourselves as well there.
Maybe we'll bring 100 Tesla enthusiasts that we've already signed up for. So
yeah, that would be
it. Would be
it would be
amazing.
really great. Last summer, Jan from Tesla Fix and Robin from Robin TV got to come out. They drove a Model X, they drove a Cybertruck, they got to experience FSD. We took them all over the country, and one of the things that they impressed on me is they said Americans don't understand how easy it is to get Tesla, because here you've got all the models. You've got the Cybertruck. Here you've got the autonomy. And in Europe, we don't have those two things. And those are the two most exciting things as of a year ago. And it was a pretty interesting perspective to get.
Damien and myself, we went actually earlier during the year. So we went in April also to test FSD. And it just makes a real fundament on your conviction for the company, for the stock. And we also tried the Cybertruck, and we were driving it, and I still remember Damien sitting like, "Hey, this is a winning company, you know. It's not a like they're just winning on all fronts."
I saw an article this week where some bank analyst said we're going to upgrade our price target on Tesla because we actually got to drive FSD for the first time, and I'm thinking. You've been assigning price targets for 20 years and you've never.
It's insane. It's
Come
insane.
on, man. What are you doing?
Insane. It's really insane. But I also think the sentiment around
living in their Excel
very,
sheet.
very bad.
Yeah,
I know from my experience how hard it is getting you out of the Excel sheet as well, Kenny. So that's the challenge, right? So.
Yeah, it's all the proof is in the pudding. Yeah, that's definitely true. And Brian, just I think we've taken a lot of your morning here, your early morning, but I would love to get your take, at least on a high level, on Optimus, if you want to give it to us.
Oh, sure. Oh my gosh. So it is exciting. If you look, there's 100 robot companies. Who knows which one's going to win? They've all got advantages and disadvantages. But here's the impossible part is we don't know where each company's actually at. We only know what their most recent demo was. And it'd be easy to say, well, Tesla's fallen behind, but then you see the video that came out just yesterday, the day before, where Optimus is walking, slips, did not fall, and on broken terrain, and that's very exciting. But the reason Tesla stands uniquely to benefit from robotics is because they are a manufacturing company. When they had their big AI day, and they were talking about how before we built it, we ran it through the crash test software that we already have. So we knew how to build it in a way that when it falls, it doesn't die. And I thought, I guarantee you no one else to that date had done that, because why would they? Boston Dynamics had this $1 million robot that they would never build because it looked cool and did cool things, but was completely impractical. Their robot had one job, and it was to raise more money, and it did that job. They never planned to build it. Where Optimus was built from the ground up as we are going to mass produce this. So just like full self-drive and just like vehicular autonomy in robotics, if two companies solve it tomorrow and one of them is Tesla, Tesla wins, because Tesla can mass produce these at a cost that the others can't, with a competency the others can't. And if two companies solve it tomorrow and neither of them's Tesla, but Tesla solves it in a year or two, they still win, because they are a tsunami and you cannot outrun it.
Yeah.
So,
I'm
very excited.
Very excited. Yeah, I'm also very excited. And there's one guy, his name is Chris Camillo. Maybe you've heard of him.
I've heard of him.
Yeah, so he's a big investor, and he might be a sort of, let's say, mingling of a futurist and somebody who loves data. So he's like a social arb trader, and he's big on this Optimus thing. So he thinks it's the biggest next thing for the whole of humanity. And he's an investor in Tesla, so that's more in the public stock. But he's also a private investor in Figure AI and another private company. I'm not sure about the name. But he actually shares on his podcast that he gets insight from those companies, but he has to sign an NDA. So in those in it, he's like searching for words, and he's like, yeah, I cannot say everything, but he literally said, like, I think Tesla is going to be the biggest, because those companies are still busy with how is the bot going to work, and they're not thinking about how am I going to produce this at scale. And he says the only one who has access to it is actually Tesla. And from a technical point of view, he knows from sources close to Tesla that they're basically, let's say, on the same line with the other companies. So he said he thinks it's going to be a home run for Tesla. Let's see when we get there. But he's very excited about it, and he gives excellent insights on the robotics companies.
The Tesla difference, I was talking with a man who worked at Giga Nevada. And I said, is it true that Tesla wants your feedback on how to make things run smoother? And he said, wants isn't the right word. They require it. If you are not bringing suggestions on a regular basis, they'll pull you aside and say, do you think everything is perfect here? Do you think everything is as good as it could be? Because it isn't. What can we do to make it better? And they're always implementing new ideas. He would work fixing equipment. And one week he took Friday off. He comes in on Monday. He's been gone for 3 days, and he gets a trouble ticket that says, oh, you need to go to section 36 and check out the rollers. And he goes, what the hell is section 36? They're like, oh, we built a new whole thing over the weekend. Dave came up with it Thursday night. He's like, what the hell? Okay, great, let's do it. So they do move quickly. And what happens is Tesla empowers their engineers to rise to the highest level of their natural talent. And that is something that humans crave. That is why Tesla and SpaceX are the number 1 and 2 companies that engineering graduates want to work at, is because hard work is temporary, but accomplishments are forever. And I want to accomplish something. So I think that's their big advantage.
Well said.
That's nice last words for today, Brian. So thanks a lot for being with us. Please let us know when you got FSD 13 so we can do a deep dive, especially on what your observations are there. For our listeners in the Netherlands, if you want to join us to our next USA trip that we're scheduling to experience the Cybertruck, to experience full self-driving and everything Tesla has to offer, but also SpaceX with the launches, etc. Please send us, drop a comment or send us an email so we can invite you when the moment is there. Brian, thanks again. We're looking very much forward to the future as you do, and from now on you will be a friend of the show as we happily do so, and talk soon.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you very much.